from the outside. I was going to all these cool parties, mixing with great celebrities, getting paid more money at the time than I ever had. And so have it when you're doing absolutely no work on yourself internally and you're just focusing on the external. My life started slowly crashing down. Spiritual teachers might call it the dark night of the soul. I honestly realized it was me that needed to change the course of my life. I had to absolutely get rid of every sort of habit and way of thinking that I had learned my whole life just through safety. I tell the story because I want people to realize that by doing the work, things will change.
Welcome to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I'm Kelly Noonan-Gorse, and every week I speak to the leading doctors, healers, spiritual teachers, and scientists to find out what is truly possible when it comes to healing. I also interview real people with extraordinary healing stories. My philosophy is, what's possible for one is possible for all. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful journey of remembering our divine nature and tapping into the truths that shall set us free. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I am your host, Kelly Gorse, and today I am with my beautiful friend, Sarah Grynberg, who we met last fall, so just a few months ago, in New York at our friend Carissa's kind of spiritual gathering, which was very wild, and we became fast friends. And so... And Sarah is a superwoman who I'm going to tell you a little bit about right now, but her book, Living a Life of Greatness, hit the shelves today. So I'm super excited to promote this book and share everything that she has to offer because it's just beautiful and brilliant, and you will soon understand why. But a little bit about Sarah. Sarah is a keynote speaker, author, and mindset coach who empowers professional athletes, executives, and business owners to overcome unhelpful thinking and achieve greatness. With expertise in mindset, mental resilience, and happiness, Sarah's unique approach has helped countless individuals and businesses thrive. She hosts live shows, including a tour with renowned author Johann Hari. Is that how you say it, Johann?
Yes, perfect.
And is the creator of the acclaimed podcast, A Life of Greatness, where she interviews global icons like Matthew McConaughey, Andrew Huberman, and Esther Perel. Sarah also shares practical insights through her supplementary series, Sarah's Thoughts, helping listeners unlock their potential and embrace purposeful living. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you so much. It was so interesting that you mentioned how we met, because I was thinking a lot about that this morning, obviously knowing that I was going on your podcast. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, if that's all right, to start off with, because it's a chapter in my book about finding your people. And obviously, you know, you and I, Kelly, are what people would call middle-aged. And people find it harder.
God, that sounds so bad.
I know. But apparently middle age starts at 35 because we're living longer. So that's okay.
Okay.
But it's interesting how, as Kelly just mentioned, we were both at a retreat and, you know, then we ended up having dinner with some other people when the retreat was ending and we became friends straight away. We just got along really well. And I find that this is not something that is hard in the sense that people think it's hard to make friends when you're older. But when you're on the same wavelength as someone, and we're all energy, right? And like attracts like, that it doesn't surprise me that we became friends because we were both open to one another and we were interested in each other's stories and we had a lot in common. And I feel that for anyone out there that might be struggling with friendships, you just really have to be open to what's around you and you'll find people when you least expect it.
I totally agree. I feel like also the more aligned you are on your path, and we'll talk about how your dark night of the soul kind of realigned you to where you are today. The more aligned you are on your path, which might take a little wake-up call, where you stray so far from your path. But once you get back on track, I find, as I'm experiencing this now, just like synchronicities and magnetism to our people, we find our people quickly, and it's validation from the universe, God, whatever terms you want to use, that you're back on track. So
Mm.
if things are rough going, or you're stressed or burnt out, or feeling like you can't find your people, that's also kind of a lamppost saying you're off track to your authentic path and self. And so it's just something to look at, because I feel like the past couple months, like I'm really aligned and I really moved forward into this next chapter of my life. And it is like rapid fire. Like people are just coming
Wow.
to, like you and others, and just it feels very supportive and in flow. And it's because I stopped abandoning myself and
Yeah.
listened to the call.
I totally agree with that because I also found when I really got to know myself better and I did the work on myself and really stepped into my authentic self, then it was like these people started coming into my life when before I had a lot of the same friends for a very, very long period of time, and maybe I wasn't making that many new friends. And then when I decided to realign friendships, and felt good within myself, as you mentioned, the doors started opening and the right people walked through that I was able to support on their journey. They were able to support me, and we kind of met at another level. And I agree. I think the synchronicities happen. It's breadcrumbs from the universe when things are in the right direction and you're really doing that inner work on yourself.
Totally. So, living a life of greatness. This is your first book. It came out today. So excited.
Yes.
I know firsthand what it takes to write a book. So take us back to how you came, what inspired you to
Yes.
write the book, and all that you do today.
So it was really interesting. For a long period of time, I was living this perfect life on the outside. So I wanted to be in entertainment from a really young age, and I did whatever I could to kind of get there. Not dissimilar to you, did acting and all these kind of drama and theatre studies and plays, and went to university and studied film as well as marketing and a few other things. And then a teacher of mine said to me, 99% of actors are unemployed. If you think about doing this full time, then you can think again. And in a small period of time, that big fire that was inside of me suddenly got smaller and smaller. And my path veered. I went on to do marketing and some other things, and I never quite felt content in what I was doing. And then I got a job at this biggest radio station in Australia, and I started working there, and I was absolutely alive again. And again, I got a role in producing and did all these wonderful things. And then I got asked to be the producer of this big breakfast radio show. And one thing about radio is that once you hit the breakfast slot, that is the prime time. You actually have like the pinnacle of any producer's role that you could want. So from the outside, I was, going to all these cool parties, mixing with like great celebrities and getting paid more money at the time than I ever had. And I thought, my God, I have made it, everything I have dreamed for. I'm at this point in my life. And so have it when you're doing absolutely no work on yourself internally and you're just focusing on the external. My life started slowly, slowly crashing down. And being a breakfast radio producer, I was up at 3 a.m., 5 days a week. And I had a 2 and a 4 year old at the time. And I slowly started to crumble and just became absolutely miserable. Miserable in my inner world, is miserable on my outer world. And it was probably 6 months into the role where I got really, really sick with the flu. So I actually was going to go into work, but I was so petrified that, I'd get in trouble if I didn't go in, but I literally couldn't lift my head from the pillow. So I called in sick. And it's an interesting thing. I'm sure you have this where the brain takes snapshots of the worst moments of your life and the best moments of your life. And really, honestly, anything in between that, I find it very hard to remember. But I remember this like it was the other day. I was sitting on my couch, just so unwell, And I thought to myself, what the hell has happened? How has my life gone to being so externally looking so wonderful, yet internally I am depressed, sad, just it's just a horrible, horrible place to be. And spiritual teachers might call it the dark night of the soul. Whatever it was, I don't know what came to me, but in that moment, I honestly realized that it was me that needed to change the course of my life. And at the time, as I said, I had done no inner work, but I had this knowing that something needed to change. And I'd heard a lot about the mind body connection, and I was very interested in psychology and Buddhism and all these other modalities. So honestly, I just poured myself into every single book under the sun. I started listening to audiobooks, reading books. I met mentors who started teaching me again, like you said, when you're ready to do the work, the right people come into your life. And honestly, Kelly, in a very short period of time, my life started changing. And one thing I really want to note, because I feel like people could listen to us today or they could read a book and they understand the work, but they don't actually live it or breathe it. It's a very different thing. I was very much embodying everything that I was reading and doing. And that is what made the change. And honestly, after, as I mentioned, a short period of time, I left that radio job. I ended up moving into the podcast area. And this is when podcasting was at its infancy. And I got a role doing more producing. And 6 months in, I thought of A Life of Greatness as a podcast that I would start, because I thought, oh my God, this work actually works. Like, we hear people talking about it and we hear all these gurus, all these motivational speakers telling us to do certain things. But I can tell you that from what I did, my life is changing so rapidly. And really, that's the reason for my podcast. And honestly, I have never looked back since. It was my mission to teach people what I had learned in a way that was easy to understand.
Yeah, and it's been a huge success. And that I just
Yeah.
love this story because as you were talking, I also, a lot of people are like, who, come to me for healing advice, obviously. And really, I don't have the answers for people. All I can know is my experience and my own knowing in every moment to guide me left, right, up, down. And I'm not 100% right all the time, but I am enough in tune. And you said you hadn't done any inner work, but you just had this knowing and that you had to change. And when I give people kind of my take on this healing thing, it's like when you get a knowing that something's got to change, or when you know that something's off, or you're stuck, or you're off track, or you're dealing with a diagnosis and you know that you should not be in that state. Truly, when you set the intention, when you pick up the books, when you just start to tune in with yourself and really have that genuine intention of wanting to change and wanting to learn and wanting to do things differently and wanting to come back in alignment with your truth and yourself, the teachers, the books, the guidance appears, and it's not going to show you the whole path, but it is going to show you one step at a time. And you just have to keep trusting that and keep trying to embody what you're learning along the way.
Absolutely. I want to tell you a story because I think your audience are the right people to hear this. And I swear on my life, this is true. When I when I left that radio job, what happened was I live in Melbourne in Australia, and we were doing a Sydney show from Melbourne because the talent were in Melbourne. And it was all, a bit odd to do that. And I remember my boss coming down at the time saying he wanted to meet me. And I thought, oh, this is a bit weird coming all the way from Sydney to Melbourne. And basically, he said, would you move to Sydney to do the job because we're moving everyone over? And I'm like, I hate this job in my mind. I'm not going to move my whole family to Sydney. Like, that's just not going to happen. And basically, if that didn't happen, my role would be redundant. This is an interesting thing, right? Because I didn't want to let go of that job. And we all have this in our life from the universe where if we hold on tight to something and it shouldn't be coming on our way with us, then we get slammed with it to be removed, right? So it was removed in a way that probably wasn't ideal, but at the same time, it was setting me up for something greater. So I went to bed that night when I realized that I wasn't going to have a role very shortly. And I am by no means a religious person. And at that stage, like I do believe in a higher being, what that was, who knows. But I went to bed that night and I remember staring at the ceiling saying, if anyone is listening to me, I was talking in my head, please, I love this company. I'd love to keep working at it. I can't work these hours, waking up at 3 a.m. 5 days a week. It's just, I can't do it with young kids. And I really want to work with beautiful talent who are appreciative, and I want to be in a job where I give back. I swear to God, I said those things. Within 2 weeks, I got a call from the head of the company saying, we want to offer you a role in podcasting. You're amazing. We don't want to lose you. The biggest celebrities in Australia were moving from radio to podcasting. I got the role at the time as their executive producer. I was working 4 days a week from like 9 till 4. So it would fit in with my lifestyle. And as I mentioned to you, I came up with my podcast, A Life of Greatness, a few months in. You can't make this stuff up. You can't. And I tell the story because I want people to realize that by doing the work, things will change. They really will. And both you and I are examples of that.
Mm-hmm. It's so true and it's so powerful. And I'll go back. Maybe someone has heard this before, but it's a similar kind of story where I had watched The Secret, and I'm sure, Rhonda Byrne, Australian. Um,
Yes.
and I started gratitude journaling. And I think it was Bob Proctor in the film that was like,
Mm.
act as if you already have it. So I just was like, okay, well, this is kind of weird. So I journal, and it took 3 months from watching the film and doing the work every day. And at first it feels silly because you're like, I'm so happy and grateful now that, and I'm saying something as if I already have it, which I don't. So it's like, now that I have the money to get a massage every week, now that I have the money to whatever it was that I was trying to manifest at the time. And and then I was like, oh, it kind of feels good to fantasize. We should. So I was having fun doing it, and I'd pepper in things I was really grateful for. And same thing, like you can't make this stuff up. 3 months later, I got this opportunity, I got this audition. It's a casting call to be a fit model. I didn't even know that this job existed, but I was waiting tables at the time and I was acting and modeling. And so they sent me on this casting and I booked this job as a fit model. So basically, Guess Jeans was now going to fit their jeans on my butt. And
Wow.
I was like, I didn't even know this existed. And I started getting paid. I got paid 3 times as much for working like 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. And I was like, this stuff really works. So again, it's like learning something new and then putting it into practice and having faith and trust. And obviously trying things on. And if it feels good, it feels good. But um, life really does show when you're in alignment and when you are, I don't know, starting to look at yourself and practice these things to make you a better person and make you more present and co-create with life. When you really tap in
Oh,
and believe in that power of like we are co-creators and start to practice that, like the miracles really do unfold.
I absolutely agree. And something you said is so powerful. What I learned during this time is that idea of co-creation. Before that, it was like I was eyes closed, just running into life. And sometimes good things would happen, then a lot of bad things would happen. And I was always worried about stuff, and I had no control over my mind. My mind was just raging out of control because I didn't know how to tame it. I mean, my work now is all in mindset. We just need to learn how to manage our mind being the most important thing and knowing that we are that co-creation with the universe because when we know that, it gives us so much agency because otherwise we feel like we're just here and just life happens. And as I mentioned, it's good sometimes, it's bad sometimes, but that doesn't allow us to feel like we're ever in control or ever guiding life either. I watched a really interesting Netflix show last year. It was with Joel Edgerton and another beautiful American lady whose name, I think it was Jennifer Connolly. And it was all about these idea that life is a whole sequence of doors. And it comes out of a lot of quantum theory that they were talking about, a lot of quantum physics, where dependent on your mood and your vibration, a different door is going to be opened. And that different door leads to different paths. And honestly a true believer of that, that dependent on where we are internally is where the different opportunities are going to arise. And not everything is always peachy. I mean, we were talking before we got on this podcast today about what happened in LA with the fires. That's not anyone, any personal person's fault who got obviously lost homes and all that kind of stuff. But, the way that you are dealing with it after and the way that you are still doing that inner work and the way that the right people have still shown up for you and are showing up for you is kind of showing you all those doors that are opening because of what you're doing in the world and the way that you are vibrating in the world. And I feel that is something that is having that knowledge has very much changed my life as well.
Yeah. And I think that life prepared me without me knowing,
Mm,
just gave me like the resilience and, like got last minute invitation to go to this first Tony Robbins event by his beautiful wife, Sage. And I said yes, even though it wasn't like very easy to do. I was just like, okay, so that was December. That just all these little things. Then I was at Dave Asprey's 40 Years of Zen for the 2 days doing deep, deep forgiveness work and mental neurofeedback training, and puts us in this state of like real spaciousness and healing and resilience. Just the 2 days leading up to the fires. So like there's
wow.
just always, if you do the work and you start to listen and observe and quiet the mind on a daily basis, which I've been attempting to do, not even quiet the mind, but just like really connect internally with my breath and meditate since 2007, you just start to realize that everything really is happening for you, even when your house is burning to the ground and all these things that you love burning with it. It's like there's nothing I can do about it. And I'm in it with thousands of other people. And there's clearly, everything has pointed that there's a much greater intelligence and orchestration at work here. And I want to co-create with it. I don't want to resist and fight
Mm.
against it anymore?
And as you mentioned, doing the work, it's just an ongoing process. And, I had to do this big talk for International Women's Day yesterday in front of a lot of women. And I think people want these quick solutions, like say these 5 words for 10 days and you'll, get to this stage of your life or earn this amount of money. Like we know that's not going to happen, right? But if you go into that silence every day or that kind of space of meditation or whatever it is, if you are watching the mind and being, it's a chapter in my book, becoming so consciously aware of your thoughts, your feelings, what you're saying to yourself and to others, and your actions is such a big part of it. As you know, for change to occur, you need to change. You can't just think change is going to occur being the same person. But if we're conscious of all these things, then we start seeing things change. But it's not like you just do the work and then it's like, all right, I've done that course and I sign off now and I go back to being what I was. It's till the day that we die, but it's okay because you learn to love it, right?
Hmm.
I go into that silent space every day of meditation. Meditation is one of my favorite things to do. And when people would talk about meditation, I was like, shut up with talking about meditation. Like that's all you hear about. And for most people, I laugh because it sounds so boring. And I like think of my friends going, oh, I'm not good at meditation or I don't want to do this. And I thought I was like that too. I thought I had a monkey mind. I didn't think I did have a monkey mind. And the first time I was in meditation, my thoughts were flying around at 100 miles an hour, as I'm sure everyone's are, because the untrained mind is not going to go into meditation for the first time and know what to do. But like anyone, I started finding meditations that really worked for me. I studied Vedic meditation as well. That was a great thing. I learned from some really good meditation teachers. And every day I showed up. I showed up when I was exhausted. I showed up when I had young kids. My kids know that when my study door is closed, that I'm in meditation. They've grown up like that now. They know not to come in. And I'd wake up before they woke up, which could be really early because I find a lot of people say, "Oh, I've got young kids, I can't do it." You can do it if you make the time for yourself. And I do these practices as well as breath work and other things because I want to be a better person and not because it's just a selfish me, I want to feel better. If I feel better, then our conversation today is better. The way I show up for my kids and my family is better, for my community, for my friends. And, as we know, the beautiful late spiritual teacher Ramdas says, we're all here to walk each other home. That's why we're here. So why wouldn't you work on you to be able to then help others?
Totally. And when you aren't resourced, when you don't have these practices, or when life, and there will be moments where life, and my moment was very long, but I still did the work. I still practiced every day, but there's going to be moments where you're just dealing with so much, or it's just that season of your life where you've got to work through some shit and you're under resourced. And you can't really show up for other people until you get yourself resourced. And if you give yourself that love and that time to, you know, connect with yourself and do the daily practices and start to just get your system back into a parasympathetic rejuvenation state, rather than just constant stress, overwhelm, and burnout, because we just cannot show up for other people in that space in a productive, healthy way. So it's
100%.
it's so important to have these practices to anchor us into spaciousness and presence and health.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And the times where I feel very overwhelmed or life hits you, which is always going to happen. One thing I do want to say is that life is life. It's never for any one person going to be perfect always. It just isn't. Doesn't matter how rich you are, doesn't matter how famous you are. Life is going to intervene with bumpy roads because my belief is that's why we're here, is to learn. But when you have the toolbox of practices like we're talking about today there for you, that time between when life intervenes in a negative way and how you bounce back is so much faster. I mean, my old self used to, I don't know, have some sort of thing happen in my life, and it could take me months or a year to get over it. Now it can be a matter of hours where you get affected still, but that affected time is so much smaller. So I think that's very interesting for people to hear because people sometimes think once you know the work and you do it, your life is always going to be amazing, but that's not the reality of life.
Correct. So now, as you say, getting over things in a couple of hours, I immediately think of forgiveness. And it could be a host of other things. It doesn't have to be a betrayal or an injury from someone that you need to forgive, but it is something that you talk about in your book. So talk to us a little bit about
Yeah.
your journey with forgiveness, what you've learned, and how you do it today.
I think for a very long period of time, people were like, oh, I'm never going to forgive that person. And it was like a badge of honor. Like, I will, dislike them up until the day that I go into my grave. And they felt superior because they weren't going to forgive a person, right? And the more that I started researching forgiveness and the more I learned about forgiveness, I realized this. Forgiveness is not about letting the other person off the hook. It's allowing yourself to be free. And I have two really interesting stories about that. I mean, I've dealt with my own forgiveness of things that have happened in my life. And I can tell you it's been bloody hard and I've been angry. And like anyone else at the time, I didn't want to forgive the person. I hadn't done anything wrong. But in saying that, I didn't want to go the rest of my life being a bitter, angry person because I know holding onto those emotions is only going to be detrimental for me in the long run. You know, as you mentioned earlier, when we're in fight or flight, that's okay if we're running away from something, but it's not okay if we spend a year in that fight or flight because we know that ends up in disease in the long run. You studied this in your movie and all the work that you do. We know that. So why would you do that? And when we're getting angry with a person or when our mind goes back to what they've done, we're going straight back into that. The mind doesn't know the difference between it happening a year ago or it happening the day before. And as I mentioned, I interviewed this NRL star in Australia, and NRL is what's called kind of rugby. He wanted his whole life to play rugby. He started playing. He got up to a level, this guy, Alex McKinnon, that others hadn't. And by his 20s, he was professional and he was playing in this really huge rugby league in Australia. He was in the middle of a game one day, it was all televised live. And a couple of guys came over. They tackled him illegally. And within that tackle, he became in an instant paraplegic. He couldn't walk, he could barely move. And he said to me, Sarah, I was so angry in the first few months. Not only was I in pain, but I was so, so angry. And when people stopped visiting and, I went back home and he's obviously in a wheelchair, he thought, I actually can't go on like this. If I do not let go of this anger that I have towards these people, I may as well have died as well that day. And he made the choice, and this is hard, and I'm not saying everyone should do this, but this was his choice to call the men that tackled him and tell him that he had forgiven them. And he said, when I did that, it was like the weight of the world had come off my shoulders. And Alex now, he studied psychology, he's got a couple of kids. No exaggeration, he is one of the happiest people I have ever met. And he said he would never have done all these things had he still played rugby. So he was so unbelievably happy. And another story that you would know too, which is very big in America, was when I interviewed Scarlett Lewis, whose son Jesse was murdered in Sandy Hook. I mean, she is just the perfect example of forgiveness. And she said something interesting that day. For all reason, everyone was so angry, and she was angry too. And shocked, and there were so many things that were making her so upset. But she said, I did not want to go on being angry because I knew that if I did, then Adam Lanza may as well have killed me that day too. I had another son that I wanted to live for. She found reasons why she could feel like she could forgive, to allow herself to be free. And she managed to do that. And then she put her life into service and has the Jessie Lewis Choose Love Foundation, where she speaks to children at schools so they don't end up in the way that the man who killed all those kids at school did. And when we're listening to stories like this, we realize that, again, people do horrible things, and it's not about letting them off the hook, but it's about allowing us to be free. And there's a beautiful fable, and it goes like this. These two prisoners of war were walking side by side, and one man said to the other, have you forgiven your captors? And the other one says, never, I will never forgive them. And his friend says to him, then they still have you in jail then, don't they? And that, to me, is forgiveness. Again, it's not about letting the other person off the hook. It's allowing yourself to be free.
Oh my gosh, that's so much there. I mean, just the two examples that you've chosen, like for me to lose physical ability, like Alex, or to lose a child, like Scarlett, those got to be the two hardest things to forgive, And
Absolutely.
oof, it is so hard. I'm just my petty versions of that in my own life. I'm like, well, fuck, I should not be holding on to these things. But it is for me, my work, what's what is coming into my awareness and experience and what I'm learning to embody is really like this total trust in this divine plan unfolding that includes, you know, the shooter at Sandy Hook and includes, and it's bringing everybody into lives of service. And it's, I mean, there's the fires, like all these wars, like it's hard to kind of distill and be like, well, what, how could God, a good God, like allow wars and suffering and all of these terrible things that we're talking about occur? And it really is just, to me, this kind of play of consciousness really understanding itself through all of us. And there's different levels of unconsciousness, and we're here to experience it all because we're little like rays of the divine. We're consciousness. We're God in expression in this 3D kind of simulation so that it could learn more about itself. Consciousness learning about itself, if that makes sense. I know this, we just took a turn
Absolutely.
to the higher.
No, I've just forgotten her name, but there was an amazing woman that I heard speak. I heard a snippet of a talk that she had given, and she was one of the mothers of a hostage that died in Gaza, and he was killed an hour before the army found him. And she's American citizen, and she was saying that she was closer to God when her son was captured. She felt closer to God than she ever had before. And there's a lot of people that would feel the opposite, right? But
Mm.
she has such a divine look at the world and such a belief in faith that through the horrors of what this woman has gone through and continues to go through, she still can feel that she has this faith inside of her. And I know that a lot of people might not be able to feel that, but we know that the people that do live longer, there's been research on it, that people that do believe in a higher God or a higher faith of some sort are usually happier, and they usually live longer because it allows us, to your words, to know that there's something else in play. And I mean, that is my belief. I heard a beautiful quote the other day, and it was, "Don't take away someone's hope because it might be all that they have."
Mhm.
And I think that's so true. We are so quick to say to especially our kids or something like that, you could never do that, or you're not good enough, or whatever it is. But who are we to say those things, right? Who are we to let someone else's dreams collapse through saying a certain phrase or word or whatever it is? Like, let everyone be and work out life for themselves.
Yeah. And as you're saying that too, like, was it Jesse? Did he write on the like do of his
Yes.
car? I mean,
Yeah.
that when I heard that story, I was like, that child somehow knew
Mm.
what was going to happen that day. Like, and it just those little things like show that there is this like divine orchestration and perfection to how all of this is unfolding, and um if you don't know the story, go listen to Sarah's episode with
Yeah.
her. um but truly, when we can kind of open the aperture and pull back and see like an Alex McKinnon, who is now one of the happiest people, and all of these tragedies that lead people to this life of service, and the beauty of humanity that showed up for people, and in the fires. Like, I was just talking to my friend Jesse, and he's like, literally, our little neighborhood, they live in Rustic Canyon, came together, and he was like annoyed sometimes on this group chat, like this,
Yeah,
neighbor
yeah.
neighbor brought everyone together, and he was always like, oh my God, this chat. But then in this fire, like the chat, like people were on night watch, just like shoveling ember by ember with like a backpack with a hose. Like, they just totally came together. Nobody was worried about who did what for who. It was just like, humanity steps up, and miracles occur, and it's just so awe-inspiring to see the beauty that comes from tragedy. And I just again, it's just like life is happening for us, and it's brutal, and it's painful, and it's horrific at times. And, if you believe in this kind of higher intelligence and beauty and love, which we come from and which we'll go back to and do this multiple
Mm.
times, it makes it easier to kind of navigate the journey.
I want to, that is what you said is so beautiful. And I want to mention something about this. It's a chapter in my book called Always Choose Love. And you said people will show up, right? And there's so much horror happening in the world. There always is a lot, but it is on another level. I feel like we all feel on so many levels, from the fires to what's happening in the Middle East to just things in America in general. And, even people in Australia who can barely afford to, put food on the table with prices being so high. There is a lot that is going on. I went to a retreat a couple of years ago, and within that retreat, we had to do healing. It was kind of, I suppose, you know, um, a little bit like you put your hands in front of the person, a kind of a Reiki style healing. We don't know the people that are lying in front of us. A lot of them are dying. They're ill, but that is not why we're there. We were just told that we need to give them unconditional love. And I remember closing my eyes and thinking to myself, I had heard some really bad news about a friend before I went into this retreat, and I wasn't feeling myself. I was really worried about my friend. And I'm putting my hands, near this person. I'm trying to give love. And really, honestly, not much was coming out. I remember thinking, this poor person, she got me, and I'm not that good. I don't feel really like I got a full tank here, but I will try my best, right? And there were interesting things that happened. I remember kind of opening my eyes a little bit, and I looked around the room. And again, I can remember this snapshot because it was so beautiful, like it was the other day, even though it was years ago. I looked around this room that had maybe 1,000 people in it, and there were people of all ages, all races, giving love to the person in front of, like on the ground in front of them. I remember seeing this boy, he would have been 20 or something, and he had tears just rolling down his eyes. And I remember thinking, like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. This boy is just barely over being a teenager, and he's literally giving love to some old woman who is lying on the ground that he's never met. There was a woman who was, I could see that her mouth was moving and she was praying. She was just like in prayer. And everyone was at that moment, not knowing what that person in front of them had, what illness. They were just giving all the love that they could. And I remember thinking, God is good. Like,
Mhm.
God is good. Like, this is one of the most beautiful moments of my life. And I'm literally with strangers. And then something really interesting happened when we were told to then put our hands onto ourselves. And remember, was thinking I was giving no love to this woman because I felt depleted. As soon as I moved my hands onto my heart, I kid you not, I have never felt so much love in my life. And I realized that I had been given her love, but maybe that love needed to come back to me at that time then. And I closed my eyes, and you know what it felt like? It felt like I was being cuddled by all my favorite people. I nearly fell asleep because the love, it wasn't this huge feeling. It was just feeling like I was being held by the divine. And I remember in my eyes closed state, I could see every member of my family in front of me. And I just fell into love at that moment. So this one experience where I was thinking I wasn't able to show up properly ended up being one of the most unbelievable moments of my life. And I saw how humanity comes together. And even when things are so dark in the world, I saw the goodness of people. And most people are good. Most are good. And I think that we can't lose sight of that.
Mhm. Totally. Oh, what a beautiful story. And as you were talking too, I thought of Lynn McTaggart's work, and she
Oh,
does
yes.
research on group healing, and Joe Dispenza's doing like the cage healing now, and there's all this scientific data that if you send intention to a field and where two or more are gathered, but really they start doing, 8, 10 people, and you tune into your heart and then you send the love into the field and with the intention and the vision of this person just getting love and healing. And it shifts things for the the person getting healed. It also group meditations around the world shifts the human resonance of the planet. Like pretty cool stuff happens when you get a group together with a singular intention and rooted in love. So I was interviewing her for a something, and she was saying, there was oftentimes people that wanted to be in my courses because they wanted to be the healee. They wanted to be healed. So because they were dealing with something and they wanted to receive the healing. And oftentimes there was some that was just like, it's not working, it's not working. I'm stuck, I'm stuck, I'm stuck. And so she always took that person and said, you're not going to be the Healy. You're going to be the person sending intention. So to take the attention off themselves and to put their love onto someone else. And she said 100% of the time, what we found is when humans are taking the attention off themselves and their intention is to take the love from their heart and put it to someone else, that's when the healing occurs in their body. So it is
Oh,
like, that's kind of how we are designed. We are communal beings, and we are meant to be in service and in love. And in that, it is through her work and many others scientifically proven that when we give, we actually do receive, tenfold,
100%.
you know?
Tenfold, tenfold. And my story is a perfect example of that. But I always have this mantra going in my head. There's always more love. There's always more love. And when things seem really bad, I just keep saying that to myself because it just centers you, right?
Mm.
And, a lot of my practices are formed around love. Like I will try and do in the mornings a heart meditation, a lot of that heart math work where you're really just centering yourself into love because that is the emotion that is going to drive the light in the world. And if we can center ourselves to that, then we start to see a lot of things shift.
Totally. And love, I always think of Anita Morjani's story, but so many
Mm.
people that have near-death experiences, they all describe that when they're on the other side and they've kind of lost their body and they've just melted into the oneness of creation and God and heaven and whatever they call it, it's they just feel this expansive love that they can't even put words to because it feels just so good. And I just feel like that is our true essence.
Mm.
And then when we come down into these little 3D little meat suit bodies, we it's contraction of that expansion. So we get these tastes of it. We get these mini experiences of that of our true essence. And that's where we will go back to. And that's what we come from. That's what we're made of. And so the more we can cultivate that here, Marianne Williamson says if you come from love, you create heaven on earth. If you come from fear, you create hell on earth. It's that simple. Like that's
It's
my
that simple.
spiritual tenet.
Yeah. And we have free will here. So it's up to us to make those choices. And I mentioned that movie at the start with the sliding doors because that is what's going to happen. Those different doors will open based on if we're looking through the lens of, as Marianne says, love, or if we're looking through the lens of fear. And when we know that, when we're consciously aware of that, it's up to us to choose how we're going to perceive things and how we're going to move through the world.
Exactly. Well, I mean, you and I, we know we're like the
I know,
same.
I know. We
I'm just going
honestly
to keep
are.
going. Yes, yes, because we're very similar. We have the same beliefs and lots of same experiences. But for some reason, because I'm a sports nut and I'm just a junkie, I love athletes. I love elite athletes. I love, people, elite anything, people at the top of their game. I want to understand what got them there. But you work with some of these elites and like how do you work with like a pro athlete? Like do you have any stories or one story that particular like how do you shift their mindset to get them into flow? Or is there a particular story that you think will help that you
Yes.
unstuck someone?
So what I find is really interesting is doesn't matter if it's executives, the everyday person, or an athlete, we all have that negative mindset that is running through us, right? So there was a time where I was actually coaching quite a few pro cyclists, and their mind needs to be strong. And I'm talking like hardcore professional Tour de France people. And what I find really interesting is obviously they are able to train, but it is their mindset that's going to get them to the next level, and especially in those sort of conditions, right? So how do we train the mind? And it's not dissimilar to how you and I would train our mind. I mean, when there are negative thoughts that come up, what do you do? Do you believe them or do you choose a better feeling thought? You know, for me, if I have a negative thought that comes up, I can't change that thought, but I know I can replace it with a better feeling thought. And we know this, as you know, through neuroplasticity, that the brain is able to rewire itself up until the day that we die. But for a long period of time, scientists thought that it stopped when we're around 30. We now know that if we train the brain properly, then we're able to do what we want with it. So that's a big thing that I speak to athletes about, the way to rewire their brain. You know, if we have ruminating thoughts that come up, which they experience a lot during competition or before competition, I'm not good enough, that person's better than me, you know, I'm not feeling like I'm in the great shape to be able to do that race or whatever that they have. How can you change the mind to believe what you think is true? And you sort of spoke about that when you talked about your gratitude journal. What if you start training the mind to believe what you wanted it to? You know, writing it down as you mentioned that you did, or every time that negative thought comes up, replace it with the better feeling thought. When you're ruminating over things, do I know, a lot of Byron Katie's work, do I know for sure that that's true? 90% of the time we don't know for sure that that's true. If there's something we can do with that negative belief, then we take action on it, right? You know, that's, you know, internal levels of control and external levels of control. That's psychology 101. Are we able to do something different with the belief? Yes, we are. So let's go and do it. And if we know for sure that whatever situation we're in is 100% true, then we go into acceptance of that situation. And when we have acceptance of a situation, we're able to take agency and take the emotional attachment out of the way. So honestly, the biggest thing that I do with athletes is train their mind. They know how to train their bodies, right? But it's training the untamed mind. And you know, I think for anyone listening, when you can get control of your mind, the world opens up for you. I mean, Rumi, who was a Sufi poet, an amazing Sufi poet way back when, has this beautiful quote that says, "Why do you put yourself in jail when the door is wide open?" And he's talking about the mind, right? For years and years and years, I put myself in jail with my mind. All I did was worry. I grew up with a beautiful family, but they would worry the whole time. So I was ingrained to worry. And it was only for safety, right? It was not about them doing anything bad. They would like, you know, think the worst case scenario. And if the worst case happens, then it'll be okay because you were thinking about that anyway. Oh my God, that is perhaps the worst thing that we can do. And we know through manifestation or quantum physics that if we're just thinking the worst, then most likely that's what's going to come to us. So this is what I grew up with. Worrying, thinking that if I thought the worst, it would be more comforting in the long run. All these sort of things. Like I had to absolutely get rid of every sort of habit and way of thinking that I had learnt my whole life just through safety, and rewire my mind to be able to succeed. And as I said to you, it takes time and I'm still doing it, right? It's not something that I just did a couple of times and I'm like, wow, that worked. I am constantly working on it every day. And one thing that I teach a lot of athletes, surprisingly, not as many do this as what you would think. And I feel that you would do this practice as well, Kel, is visualization has become a big part of my practice. I absolutely loved it. I learned it probably a decade ago, and it was just something that I became really, really good at. So at the end of my meditation, every single day, I will go into visualization and I will feel what it feels like to be in the position that I want to be. You know, for athletes, they know through scientific research, they do the same with musicians, that if an athlete is doing training and visualization, they have a lot more chance in being able to win that race or conquer whatever it is or play their instrument better than if they're just practicing and not doing the visualization. And I know for me, when I do that visualization every day, when I imagine myself on that stage or whatever it is that I want to achieve in my life, I know for sure that I am there. It gives me agency to know that I am bringing what I want to me. And I will tell you that it works. You know, there's a lot of data as far as quantum physics is concerned to show that when you're matching that vibration through the quantum, that it's drawing it to you, right? It's drawing it to you. You can't then, with your eyes open life, go and start thinking it's never going to happen. You obviously need to have that belief, like you did with your gratitude journal. But when we're priming our minds through visualization, it is just one of the most greatest things we can do to bring what we want into fruition. And it's been very successful with a lot of athletes. But as I said, surprisingly, not as many do it as what you would think.
And it doesn't take much time. And I think the biggest hurdle for me, because I know it works, and then I fall off of practice. And then, like, I literally emailed Rhonda Byrne because she reached out with fires and she was like, I'm really trying to receive in life right now and not have to like do everything myself. And so I'm in this position and I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling stuck in this area. And she so graciously said, you know, let me know if I can help. So I was like, I would love to just have 30 minutes of your time to just shift this thing for me. I feel like I have so many tools but this one area I need a shift. And I know that you'll have the nugget for me. And so she's making herself available and it's such a gift to have that. But it's like, as you're saying, I feel like a lot of our blocks come in. Okay, so we do the meditation practice, we have the visualization. Even myself, who I know it works, and I feel like I've manifested a really incredible life. Sometimes I don't know even what I want, or I don't feel worthy of, um, or I feel a little silly like wanting it. So I guess just for people that are struggling to even know what they want because they've never allowed themselves to want what they truly want, what would you say?
Well, I think it's not always material things, right? So I think a lot of our wanting, we think, oh, we want a new car, or we want a new house, or we want that job, or we want to love, a relationship, whatever it is. What about just wanting your inner world to be calm, wanting your cup to be filled, wanting to feel more love in your heart? You know, before I went away, at the end of last year, it was the summer holidays in Australia. I went to Bali. And tell this story because people might be able to relate. And I felt exhausted. It was a big year and I felt unbelievably depleted. And like you, I'm always doing the work, but we're humans, as we've spoken about in this conversation. Life is life. You're still going to feel times where you feel under the weather. And I just did. And it's not like some big event happened to me. I just felt exhausted. And I went to Bali and it was a beautiful time. And I know this is hard for people. I got a holiday, so I got to spend 3 weeks away from my normal environment. And I really, at that time, the only thing I wanted for myself, Kel, was to open my heart. I felt like I was going into meditation and my heart felt very, very closed. And I'm trying to give love to things. And I'm like, not really opening very much. And I could, because I know what an open heart feels like. And I could feel that it was very blocked. And so I thought, I'm just going to start at the beginning. I'm going to start at the beginning. I went to Bali. I meditated twice a day. I went into visualization. And the last part of it, where I really was going into that gratitude feeling and I was putting my hands on my heart with all my might, I was raising my energy in the belief of what I wanted to do, which was just to open my heart. And I sat there every single day. And I remember there were times I was sweating when I was doing it, but I didn't stop doing it every day. I started watching my mind because I had towards the end of last year, been so busy, so tired. When we're exhausted, we don't watch our mind as much. I was watching every thought that was going into my mind. I was making sure from a social media perspective that I was only taking in things that were uplifting. I wasn't taking in things that I know would trigger me. So I did that a lot as well. And I can say that even that little shift made a huge deal. Like it really changed what I was feeling internally. And honestly, I was listening to audiobooks. I started listening again because I was like, go back to what you did when you first started this work. I started listening to Law of Attraction books and Esther Hicks. And I mean, I had not listened to them for a decade. And I was like, again, something just resonated. I started listening to that again. And I was doing all this stuff, focusing on myself. And I swear to God, I came out of that holiday feeling $1 million with my heart wide open. Okay, that was a holiday. But I went back to those practices that were able to guide me. And all I wanted to do was open my heart. So you say, like, what if people, what if they're not sure what they want for themselves? Just work on yourself first. If you don't know what you want from an external point of view, just work on you. Because as we said, working on you is going to help every single person around you because you will be showing up as the best version of you. And then without knowing, everything else will start falling into place because you are vibrating at this higher level. And when that happens, as we said, we're all energy, then things that we want start coming our way. So even if you're not doing those visualization practices, if you're able to show up every day as the best version of you, that's what's going to attract things to you. I want to use this example because obviously you and I are very spiritual people. We're very into this practice, and I'm sure most people listening are not dissimilar. But if this is one of the first times you've ever tuned in, I worked with these two comedians in Australia. I told you I got the job in podcasting. They're huge, some of the biggest celebrities we have here. They could not think of anything worse than doing the practices that you and I are talking about. They're not that way inclined. I think they're atheists. They're just not into this stuff, right? But they vibrate at a level that is so high. And I had seen that what they wanted came to them because they showed up always as the best version of themselves. They're inherently such happy people. They gave like no other to their friends, to their community, to the people that work for them. And they were truly kind, good people. And when you show up like that, those doors will open too, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you see that happen, that regardless of your belief system, it's really how you show up in the world, how you get your inner core, worked out, and then what you're like in service to others. And service doesn't have to be in a job. It can be just being kind to people, right? And helping other people on their journey in such a small way. We can all do that.
Totally. And they're not consciously doing it, but they were programmed in a way and conditioned to believe that they deserved, it doesn't sound like they have a lot of kind of underlying belief
Yeah.
systems of unworthiness or that the world is unsafe. So they're showing up in the world because they had the blessing of being conditioned in a way that their frequency can remain high, and they were raised to be kind people, or somehow life, molded them that way. And so they give, and just in that, whatever our frequency is that we're giving out is going to magnetize back. And I love just when you talk about the heart, all things lead back to the heart right now. And I feel like we're entering this age of Aquarius and we're in it. And we've just had this few hundred years of this enlightenment and technology. And we're very much in our head and solving the world's problems up in our head. And now we're dropping into our heart. So we're bringing the feminine energy back up to balance out the patriarchy. And the heart is truly like the magnet of our being. So the more, even just, and you have so many great practical tips and just obviously profound, philosophies and everything in this book. So I encourage everybody to get it and start there. But just in that dropping into the heart and breathing. And if you need help, like focusing on your heart, just like putting your hands over your heart and just taking however many breaths it takes to just really just quiet into that attention on the heart. And then take a moment to visualize and feel things that you're truly grateful for and just cultivate. This is the power of the mind. This is how we can strum the instrument of our magnetism. And I'm saying this now as if it's so simple, but I forget every day and every moment. But really, when you can drop into your heart and shift your frequency to one of gratitude and get your mind thinking on just the beautiful things in your life and your children and your friends and your health, whatever you're grateful for. I mean, that shifts your whole frequency. And then, like you said, those doors start to open. So the more that we can watch our thoughts, the more that we can become aware of our state, and the more that we can grab the reins of our mind and drop ourselves into our heart and cultivate that gratitude. I mean, that's our free will. We can change
Yeah.
our experience.
We can move mountains. And as you know, you've pointed out, gratitude is the fastest way to happiness. It honestly is. It really is. If you find yourself in a really bad place, I mean, you had your house burnt down and you were still able to look around you at the things that you were grateful for. I mean, that is just a perfect example of how there's always something to be grateful for. And it doesn't have to be these huge things like, I'm grateful because I got the new job. I mean, how many times in our life does that happen?
Yeah.
Those are not things that happen often, but we do have a smile from a stranger. I was on a flight yesterday and I had some beautiful stranger who was sitting next to me. And she just talked to me for most of the flight. And I've always been a bit of a nervous flyer, and I just felt she didn't know I was a nervous flyer, but I was so grateful for her just talking to me and
Mm.
distracting me during that flight. And then at the end, she got my bag down from me. She was so sweet. And I thought, this is so beautiful. Again, this is firstly human nature showing up, just being so lovely. And secondly, I'm just so grateful that I got placed next to this divine woman and had this beautiful journey next to a stranger that I can tell you, never see again. These are the things to look out for. And when we notice these things in life, we have so much to be grateful for. Sometimes life passes us by very fast and we don't show up for it. And what I want to tell people is this: I didn't show up for life for most of my life. Now my second phase of life is very different, but a lot of my life, when I lived in my worried mind, I wasn't showing up because I looked at life as always being a little bit of a scary place. But even the other day, I found so much beauty in this. My daughter has started singing lessons and she learns with this beautiful teacher. And it was probably, we were 2 lessons in to the start of the year. And the teacher's so divine. She lets you actually sit in there with her. And it's this tiny little room. And the teacher is beautiful as well. And so my daughter started singing this new song, and she's only 10. And I'm listening and she's singing, and the teacher is very much obviously engaged and listening. And I ask people on my podcast, A Life of Greatness, what is your most spiritual or mystical experience? And they always talk about this oneness and these big things and this and that. I was sitting there, Kel, in this music class, and because I was so present, I literally felt like I was one with my daughter, with the singing teacher. It was like we had all risen up to this high frequency moment when she was singing. And I thought to myself, I'm about to cry right now. This is one of the most beautiful moments of my life. But I could easily have been on my phone. I could easily have been distracted. I could have had my mind just whirling with a million other things that I needed to do, but I didn't because I knew better. I know now how to control my mind, and I stopped. And in stopping, I experienced one of the most beautiful moments of my life. And
Mm.
that was in a music, like a singing lesson that my daughter had.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that that's why every master teacher, Eckhart Tolle, Buddha, everyone finds enlightenment in the present moment. And
Mm.
so all of these experiences that I've had, all these practices that we've been doing for a long time and continue to do, it's all just bringing us back to total surrender and presence and awareness of self and awareness of surroundings and practicing presence. And I was playing tennis before this, and I'm like, this hawk was flying over, and I'm in this like pretty intense singles match. And I'm just like, literally had this thought. I'm like, God, I feel like everything now is just like a mystical moment. It's just everything is so like I'm just in this state of awe. And then I lose the point and I'm like, Kelly, like get back into presence. Like you're losing the game. Because I was like, oh, I've got to talk about this like mystical moment. But it is like when you just start to cultivate love, when you start to cultivate gratitude, when we start to come back into alignment with ourself and our path, we start to be motivated to serve and we just consciously are practicing love and presence through these practices and through these forced experiences of tragedy that you just have to learn from and you find your people. It's like it's all bringing us back to just this awe of this human experience that is filled with dark and light and pain and pleasure. And it's just finding that middle way of presence and trust, you know?
It's so interesting. I'll never forget this. I heard an interview that Oprah did one day, and she said, someone asked her, like, what was one of the things that you remember most out of all the interviews that you've done? And she said that there was a lady that she interviewed whose son was dying of AIDS many, many years ago. And he was 11. And just before he was about to die, she was holding him. And he said this one thing. He said, it was all so simple. And then he passed away. And it's like, that is life, right? It's just, we make it so complex. And honestly, I don't think it is. Like, I really think that it's those little moments, like being there, being in that loving space, showing up for the right people at the right time and being present. It's nothing more than that. That is why we're here, right? To help each other on each other's journeys and to show up as the best version of ourselves. It's not complicated. It's really not. And I think that we make it complicated, but we need to look at it in a different way.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I think that as we're, again, we're not 100% of the time, we're in practice and we'll be in practice until the day we die. And so for those moments that we do mess up, those moments we do make mistakes, we are under resourced, we lose our shit. It's turning that love like you did with your hands onto ourselves and really just like, embracing our humanity and then doing better tomorrow or, next minute. So anyways, I love you. I love this book. I think everybody, your life experience, your spirit, your wisdom, is so valuable. And thank you for writing this book. Thank you for showing up on this podcast on the day of your launch. And just, I also want to say thank you to the audience for tuning in because we are here in this beautiful connection. I get to hang out with Sarah and share wisdom and it's because you guys are all tuning in and listening and on the journey with us. So, gratitude.
Kelly, thank you so much. Thank you for your beautiful questions, for your beautiful friendship. You are an absolute light, and everyone who listens to this podcast is lucky to have you. So thank you for doing the work.
Thank you so much. And where can people find you? Where can people get this book?
You can find me at Sarah Grynberg on Instagram, on every social media platform. That's my tag. My podcast is A Life of Greatness. And my book, Living a Life of Greatness, for people in the US, they can find it online and via audiobook as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Heal with Kelly podcast. Be sure to tune in every Thursday for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. And make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. Oh, and if you found this episode inspiring, please rate, review, and share Heal with Kelly so that we can grow our audience and reach more people. We truly appreciate it. Lots of love.